The program is In Focus, and your host is Vic Eliason.
Good evening and welcome to In Focus, and it's a privilege to have you join us tonight. We are going to be talking about something that doesn't go away. We're going to be talking about abortion. We're going to talk about people who feel so strongly about the issue of abortion that they are willing to put themselves on the line, in jeopardy, even willing to go to jail for the privilege of standing between the customer of an abortion clinic and the abortionist's tools. Their purpose to stand there is to issue an objection to the senseless destruction of innocent human life. Now, everyone may not have that conviction. Some may say, I'll be a sidewalk counselor. Some may be willing to picket with their picket signs. Others are willing to stand in the gap. Tonight, we're going to be talking with one of those individuals. Reverend Matt Trewhella is here, fresh out of jail. Matt, how are you tonight?
I'm doing very well, Vic.
Well, Matt, I thank you for coming and sharing with us. We're going to be talking specifically about some of the things that have been happening. The focal point of the discussion, usually geographically, centers around 60th and Capitol Street, correct?
Yes.
And this, of course, has been the scene of a clinic in Milwaukee known as Bread and Roses. The clinic has been the scene of many a protest, many a protest. I understand, if the information that comes to me correctly, is that most of the tenants in that strip mall have moved out. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Apparently, it appears at least that the information we have about the only tenant left in that area is the Bread and Roses clinic. Now, the issue there, people have come to say, we protest abortion. We protest the taking of a child's life, a preborn child. There are those tonight who, sitting in the ivory towers of journalism, will in their columns refer to those who support life or those who are pro-life as anti-abortion. Yet at the same time in their style book, they use the term pro-choice for those who would like to consider the possibility of abortion. And so it's interesting how the style book continues. Now, just a few weeks ago, sitting here at this table, we had several people from the media. Dwayne Gay from Channel 18's 9 o'clock nightly news was here with us. On the telephone line was Mark Belling from ABC Radio 1130, Talk Radio, WISN. That was our guest. And sitting across from him, a gentleman from the Milwaukee Journal, who was one of the writers. And we were talking about this very issue. And I challenged the gentleman from the Journal. I said, tell me, how is it that the style book that appears to be used in journalism allows a journalist to write pro-choice for someone who supports the option of abortion, but anti-abortion for the one who is pro-life? And he denied that there was any style selection there by the style book. At the same time, knowing another story that apparently he may not have been aware of, and it came to us from individuals who work at the Milwaukee newspaper, indicating that there was apparently, and according to the story shared with us, it was alleged that Mr. Sig Gisler, the editor, had considered altering the style book at the Milwaukee Journal so that the terms pro-choice and pro-life would be used synonymous. And from the report we have, that there were many of the editors within the newspaper that converged en masse upon his office, demanding that he not do this. Now, this happened some time back, as we have heard the report, that there was a protest among the editorial staff that this should not be the case. So, depends on whose glasses you're looking through, whether there is or isn't a style book, whether or not there are cliches that are attached to certain views, remain something to be looked at tonight. The issue that we're talking about this evening, however, is the fact that the presence of people outside of an abortion clinic, the continual presence of these people, even to the fact that they are willing not only to stand there and picket or to demonstrate, but also now have even gone to the place of picketing outside of the homes of doctors who commit abortions. And we're going to ask Matt tonight, Matt Trewhella, is it worth it? Is it doing any good?
Oh, yeah. The picketing of neighborhoods of child killers is working greatly. Over the last 10 months, there's actually been 6 abortionists who are no longer killing children here in the city of Milwaukee. Last April, Mario Zapata, who was a child killer at Bread and Roses, he quit after being confronted by several Christians, one of whom was a woman, and he had delivered 3 of her children. And she was like, "Dr. Zapata, how could you do this? You've delivered 3 of my own children, and here you are making money off killing other people's children." And from that...
He stopped. He quit.
He quit. He totally stopped. He even went to a couple Bible studies, and there was a lot of good things happening there.
Can you imagine the purging or the efforts to purge a conscience of one who suddenly comes to the light of what they have done? I think in terms of Dr. Nathanson, who finally came to his senses, and he ran one of the biggest abortion clinics in the South, was it not? Right.
And he also established one of the biggest pro-abortion organizations in the country also.
But he came to the place where he said, I can't do it anymore. And imagine the conscience of an individual being disturbed.
Yeah.
You mentioned one that quit because of convictions. What else has happened?
Well, then a month later in May, those of us in rescue went out to Emilio Lantak's neighborhood and picketed his neighborhood. In the first week, there was like a monsoon that took place, so only 12 people braved the weather. And so we went back the next week and had about 45 people. And a week later, he quit, and all because of the
Did he notify anybody?
Neighborhood. Yeah, some people we know who knew him said that it caused such a stir and caused so much trouble within the neighborhood that he decided that he would quit.
Were the neighbors upset because of the picketers, or were they upset because of their knowledge of it?
Well, some were upset because their little world was, you know, had people outside with signs, and some of them were upset because there was a child killer in their neighborhood. And then, of course, there was those who wish we weren't there and would just go away, and they're glad that preborn children are being killed. But all the fervor that was caused over it, he decided to, it wasn't worth it, and so he quit.
That's number 2.
Yeah, and he was also at Bread and Roses. Then this past December, Milton Tarver, from what I understand, had open heart surgery, and then he suffered a stroke, and he will never be able to butcher children again. He was over at 64th and Capitol at Imperial Health Services, and the clinic has been closed down since December, and it probably never will be open again. That's what we understand. And then that same month, a Dr. Wu, who was doing his work down at Sinai Samaritan, also suffered a stroke. So he'll no longer be able to do any work again. Then on February 16th, we went out and picketed 2 abortionist homes, Samuel Kraft from Summit and George Woodward from Metropolitan. And Samuel Kraft sent us a letter 5 days later stating that he had resigned and please terminate the picketing. And, you know, we've, of course, followed up on that and had a couple of people call him and talk with him. And he said that him and his wife had been considering his quitting for quite a while, and the picketing of his neighborhood was the straw that broke the camel's back. And then also, that's very exact same day that we were picketing these 2 abortionist homes, another one died. And so that's 6 that have been knocked out of the business in the last 10 months.
And as a result of your efforts, do you have any testimonies of women who have, instead of sacrificing their child on the altar of abortion, had their minds turned and took the opposite position?
Since we've been out at 60th and
Yes,
Capitol?
yeah.
Oh, yeah, all kinds of women. We have 31 children that we know of that are alive today that would have been dead otherwise, and those are just the ones that we know of. The first baby was born a few weeks ago. His name is Theodore. I think Chris mentioned him. Somebody gave me a tape of Tuesday's show. And there's another baby ready to be born in May that I know of, and it's just very exciting. And to see these children be born and to know that history will be forever different.
So what you're saying, Matt, is it is making a difference. Your efforts in vain. You mentioned to me the other day that you've been in jail about 50 times. I remember one day you called me from jail in Atlanta. And we were telling about what was going on with that great upheaval in Atlanta, Georgia, and all of the violence that appeared to be being perpetrated against the anti-abortion people, the pro-lifers, if you please. You're saying it's worth it.
Oh, it's definitely worth it. The fact that people are loving their neighbor makes it worth it. So often people say to me, you know, how can someone kill a preborn child, or how could a mother do this, or how could a doctor do this? And my response is, well, that bothers me, yes, but what bothers me more is how can we sit by while this slaughter is going on?
Matt, there's something else that bothers me too. If a pregnant woman is involved in an automobile accident, she's sitting in the car's going down the street, someone with another vehicle hits the car, she is jostled or injured in some way, and the child is affected. There are legal rights, there is recourse for that child, the preborn, the unborn child, to prosecute the person who struck that automobile. And there are rights of the preborn for legal recourse. Now, if there is legal recourse for the preborn, how can this be if this is not a person? Then we find educated, degreed, doctored, acclaimed educators and people who stand by and they say, we just don't know when life begins. Doesn't it do something to you? I mean, as a layman, I don't have to be a doctor. I mean, anyone that is married, has their family or their relationship has brought forth children. You've watched these children from birth on grow into marvelous little creatures with memory and brilliance. To say that nobody knows when life begins, it is absolutely exasperating.
It is, and it's insane. And our society is involved in doublespeak all the time because of it too. There's it's just, the whole thing is so stupid.
Matt, we were talking about on the other day, on WVCY radio, we opened, in fact it was on the whole network. People heard about you all over the country that day. Heard about the issue for which you stand, which is even more important than the Matt Trewhella.
Exactly.
The guy who is standing up for the unborn and their rights. And you're not alone, there are others like unto you. But as you shared that experience, the phone lines in our studio jammed. From South Dakota and Missouri and Kansas and all over the area, people were saying, we think that, and that was the day you stood on the courthouse steps and tore up some injunctions.
That's right.
Now, I want you to tell me about these injunctions. Tell me about what they were. Another effort to keep you away from bread and roses and demonstrating your feelings.
Right. That's all it is. It's called a personal harassment injunction, and what the person does in this case, Christine Gorski, who's the director of Bread and Roses, goes and they pay $75 to the court, and a judge issues a temporary restraining order.
Is it a judge or a court commissioner?
It's a judge.
Okay, we had a little bit of confusement there when one of the folk from the rescue operation Milwaukee called in and named a court commissioner.
Right.
And perhaps there was some confusion in that. And we stand corrected on that issue.
Right.
However, the court commissioner certainly has lines of communication with that judge.
Sure. But a judge then issues a temporary restraining order. The person is then served by the sheriff's department or by a police officer with the injunction. And from the time that the first judge writes up the order for the temporary restraining order to when there's a hearing before another judge is 1 week. So after you receive the temporary restraining order, you have to go to a hearing before a judge, And
is there a jury involved?
No, there's no jury, there's no prosecuting attorney, there's nothing. In fact, this thing is such a debauchery and such a joke, it's not even funny. I was reading up on it today. 4 of our people who have permanent injunctions against them now, when they went before Judge Landry, the judge wouldn't even allow them to give testimony from themselves or from their witnesses. The whole thing lasted maybe 180 seconds, the entire hearing, and he just slam dunked them, put this thing into effect, no testimony, no nothing. What happens is the judge sits up there and basically pontificates. You sit there, Chris Gorski's there, you're here, and he's there. He asks both of you questions and decides what he's going to do. And you're supposed to be able to call witnesses, but a lot of times that doesn't happen. In one case in 1987 concerning the harassment injunction was taken all the way up to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And in that case also, the judge, in the middle of the woman who was being served this restraining order, this injunction, in the middle of her testimony, he cut her off, put the permanent injunction on her. She didn't even get to bring any of her witnesses forward to testify on her behalf. And she appealed it all the way to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and it was still upheld. So this is just nothing but raw judicial tyranny, and that's all it is. And I have sat through countless of these proceedings from watching others in our group who are there for them and myself, and I have never ever seen a judge not give someone the harassment injunction who's asked for it.
The harassment injunction is requested by an individual.
Right.
In this case, I have a photocopy of an injunction here that apparently was served on one of the members of your group. And it is the petitioner. This is a state of Wisconsin Circuit Court document, and the petitioner in this particular case was Christine Gorski, the head of Bread and Roses.
Exactly.
And the respondent, I don't know if that's a matter of record or as a point of
the respondent in this one is Mary Lynn Hafferman.
Okay.
And she's one of the missionaries.
So the petitioner, it is a personal harassment. There have been some questions. In fact, I understand, in fact, we've had at least 3 phone calls from the director of security at Bread and Roses. At least he identified himself as the director of security at Bread and Roses. His name is Rich. Rick, rather, and he called and he indicated that these petitions or these harassment injunctions, that they were misstated, that it was not Chris Gorski petitioning the court on her own behalf, that it was simply an injunction to keep any demonstrators away from the doors. Now, this is what he said to me, and in all fairness, I listened to what he had to say.
Sure.
But in looking at this tonight, I find there is a petitioner. It is the head, the person of that heads up the abortion clinic. Yeah, there is an individual who is the victim of this injunction, who ultimately says you've got to stay away from Bread and Roses. What can't you do when this injunction is brought upon you?
What can you do?
What is it you're restricted? How badly are you restricted?
Well, for instance, this one says blocking, interfering with, or restraining in any way petitioners, and the petitioner is Christine Gorski, petitioners ingress to or egress from Bread and Roses Clinic at 5825 West Capitol Drive, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, whether petitioner is alone or with other persons, including all doors and driveway entrances or exits. And so basically what it comes down to is you can't sit in front of the door to defend an innocent person from being killed. And it's kind of interesting because they'll basically let you do anything else. I mean, you can stand out there with the sign, you can kneel on the sidewalk and pray, you can try to talk to the girls as they're coming. You can do all those things, but the one thing they don't want you doing is sitting in front of the door. And this is designed to make you stop sitting in front of the door. That's what they're trying to do.
Well, you stood on the steps of the Milwaukee County Courthouse.
Right.
And we have some video footage of what went on there And I think right now we'll watch that video footage, and I believe the sound will kind of let us know exactly what's happening. So without further comment, we'll go to videotape and be right back.
People are here today for a very solemn purpose, and they've asked us to begin with a reading from the Word of God. Rescue me, O Lord, from evil men. Preserve me from violent men who devise evil things in their hearts. They continually stir up wars. They sharpen their tongues as a serpent. Poison of a viper is under their lips. Keep me, O Lord, from the hands of the wicked. Preserve me from violent men who have purposed to trip up my feet. The proud have hidden a trap for me and cords. They have spread a net by the wayside. They have set snares for me. I know that the Lord will maintain the cause of the afflicted, the justice for the poor. O Lord God of vengeance, shine forth. Rise up, O Judge of the earth, render recompense to the proud. How long shall the wicked, O Lord, how long shall the wicked exult? They pour forth words, they speak arrogantly. All who do wickedness vaunt themselves. They crush thy people, O Lord, and afflict thy heritage. They slay the widow and the stranger, the murderer and the orphans. And they have said, the Lord does not see, nor does the God of Jacob pay heed. The righteous will rejoice when he sees the vengeance. He will wash his feet in the blood of the wicked. And men will say, surely there is a reward for the righteous. Surely there is a God who judges on earth.
As the bodies of helpless human beings are torn to pieces at 60th and Capitol in Milwaukee, so we in turn tear to pieces these tyrannical judicial documents which try to protect those who commit these acts of state legal murder. You can put them in the box. Our message to the state is a simple one, and it's this. You can't tell us not to love our neighbor as ourselves and expect us to obey. We will not obey, not when innocent human lives are at stake. When the state says you cannot bar entrance to prevent killing, that is an immoral command, one which we cannot obey.
The pro-lifer believes in union with the Declaration of Independence that the right to life of every human being is granted by God and not by the law. Therefore, it is our duty and our right to protect life. Even in the face of unjust jail sentences and in the face of court-imposed injunctions, when the law of man forbids that we rescue those who are in danger, that law cannot be obeyed. As long as the bodies of unborn children are broken by abortion, the pro-lifer shall break these injunctions.
Let's just bow and pray. Father God, I thank you for who you are as God, and I thank you that you sent your son Jesus to rescue us from death. I pray, Father, that you will give us the courage and the boldness and the persistence to love our neighbor as you loved us. I pray that you'll inspire other people to come out and rescue the children. And I just thank you again for your son Jesus. And I pray that you will be glorified and that your name will receive honor. Amen.
Is this just injunction just based on one abortion clinic or several, or?
Yes. What it is it's a personal harassment injunction. It's only good at 60th and Capitol, Bread and Roses, and it's only good when Chris Gorski, the director of the clinic, is there. The legislature in 1984 gave our courts the power to enact these injunctions, and they're really lousy because they totally bypass due process. They're a total annihilation of our Fifth Amendment rights to due process. What happens at the meetings, at the hearings, as they call them, is the judge sits up there and asks you questions and asks Chris Gorski questions, and then decides whether he's going to enact it or not. There's no prosecuting attorney, no defense, no jury there at all. It totally bypasses due process.
On bail. Okay, you said 90 days in jail and a $1,000 fine if you violated the second time?
If you violate it the first time.
Oh, violating it the first time.
The first 2 times is 90 days and or $1,000.
Okay, so technically you could be held on bail.
Yes, you can be held up to $1,000 bail.
Bail, okay. There is bail involved.
Matt, does it mean that you don't have a jury trial? I mean, how can they do that in the United States? I thought...
How can they do that in the United States? That's the whole thing. Our legislature has given the courts the power to suspend due process of law. So actually you're found guilty by an administrative hearing, and then if you break what the administrative hearing finds you guilty of, then you are charged criminally. And at that point, then you get a jury trial,
right,
and a prosecuting attorney and the whole 9 yards. But still, they're finding you guilty and charging you with something without even getting due process to begin with. It's absurd.
Has it been worth it?
Oh, yeah.
It's totally worth it.
Yeah.
The mission began in September of 1990. We've had 31 children that we know of that are alive today who would have been otherwise dead. That's just the ones we know of. The first child that we had rescued from one of our rescues back in September will be born May 6th, and we're just anticipating celebrating this child's birth greatly.
And you also have to realize that even if a child isn't saved, it's still worth it because you're providing the appropriate defense to that baby. You're doing an act of charity, and charity can't be measured. You can't measure it in terms of how many numbers, because you loved all the babies. All the babies were loved. All the women were reached out to. So that counts in the eyes of God if it doesn't count in the eyes of man.
Right. When you go out to the clinic, you may perform the only act of love those preborn children will ever know on the face of this earth.
You've seen it tonight, folks. We'd like your comments. Our guest tonight is Reverend Matt Trewhella. And Matt, after that videotape was taken, what happened?
Well, we went out the next morning and continued to rescue children, even though they said we couldn't. And we ended up in jail and were released. We were kept overnight and were released the next day at 4:30. So I was released yesterday at 4:30. And my charges and 2 of the other people's charges were totally thrown out when we went before the DA, because at this point we're still at the temporary restraining order level. We haven't gone to our hearing yet for our permanent injunction. 2 of the other people had to go back this morning to see the DA, and one of them didn't go back and the other one did, and the DA just threw that one out and said he hadn't violated it. And so he came back out and rescued right away again. He's in jail now. He's got to go before the DA again tomorrow. And we also have 2 other people that are being held in jail tonight also and have to see the DA tomorrow for the violation of the injunction. So, you know, what we're doing here is we're saying we're not going to give a pinch of incense. See, when the early church you know, was told, you know, to worship Caesar, it was so simple. It was just a pinch of incense once a year. That's all you had to do. Just a pinch of incense and you could go on your way. And what we're saying is, you know, we're going to stand in the teeth of the legal system and identify with those innocent human beings that are being slaughtered, and the slaughter is sanctioned by the state. And, you know, you can grind us up, you can flush us away, you can do anything you want to us, but we simply will not give a pinch of incense when it comes to this matter at all.
Matt, as you stood before the judge just here in recent hours, you stood in your own defense. You also called witnesses, correct?
Yes.
And there was kind of a unique situation. One of those witnesses that you tried to call is here this evening.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us about it and introduce that witness to us?
Okay. My star witness at one of my recent rescue trials was my son Joshua, and here he comes.
Hi, Joshua. How are you?
Good.
And how old are you, Joshua?
7.
7 years of age. Did you go to court with your daddy?
Yeah.
And let your daddy tell us what happened, okay?
Well, what happened was I began my defense with just showing the characteristics of an 8-week-old preborn child, because they don't start killing the children until they're at least 8 weeks old. And I was listing out for 7 or 8 minutes the different attributes of the preborn child, showing that it, because I wanted the judge to see who is being killed. And I figured let's start at the low end of the totem pole and work our way up to 20 weeks, because they kill babies to 20 weeks there. And I was talking for about 7 or 8 minutes, and the judge cut me off, and he said, Mr. Trewhella, if you're looking to get the necessity defense, you know what I feel about that. And he went into this 5-minute diatribe about what I needed to do in order to get the necessity defense. And I said, well, Your Honor, that isn't my intent, and that wasn't what I was trying to do, all the things that he shared with me. And I said, what my intent is here today, Your Honor, is that Roe v. Wade, the justices did not decide whether human beings were being killed or not. They said they could not decide. And so, Your Honor, I simply want you to see who is being killed so that you can decide today whether these are human beings worthy of our protection or not. And he just sat there for a second, and then he got a grin on his face, and he said, well, I don't think I'm qualified to make that determination. And I said, oh. And I said, okay. And I talked to him for a couple more minutes, and then I said, I have another witness I'd like to call, Your Honor. And so I said I called Joshua Trewhella to the stand. And I wanted to bring Joshua up to the stand so I could show Joshua a picture of a preborn baby and say, Joshua, what is this? Is it a celery, a carrot? What is this? And of course he would see what it is and say it's a baby. Well, as Joshua was walking up to the witness stand, the city attorney, Ms. Lappin, she objected and said, Your Honor, I object to this. First off, the defendant has probably already shown his son this book and these pictures beforehand. And secondly, Your Honor, I really questioned someone who would bring their child into a court of law, and she said it real disgustingly.
So now you're a questionable father who brought your son into a court of law.
Exactly. And then she goes on and says, besides that, he's not a doctor and he's not qualified to see that. So I said, Your Honor, I object. I said, first off, I did not show my son the book. It was a medical textbook which I had gotten from West Dallas Library. And I said, because I specifically did not want him to see it, because I knew what I was going to do here today. And I did not say anything to my son about what I would ask him or anything. And I said, and secondly, though Ms. Lappin might think it's strange that I, as a father, would bring my son into a court of law, I think it's strange that she would want to prosecute someone who simply tried to rescue a helpless human being from being killed. And then the judge stopped me, and he said, Mr. Trewhella, what is your intent? Why do you want to put him up there? And that's when I explained to him. I said, Your Honor, you said that you can't tell who's being killed, whether it's a human being or not. I want to put my son on the stand, because if a 7-year-old can tell that it's a human being, then surely me and you as 30-year-olds can tell that it's a human being. And he said, no, I'm not going to let you put him on the stand, but I didn't care at that point, because the point had been made. So I guess they were fearful that it might be seen that Joshua was the only one in the room who hadn't been educated beyond his intelligence and could still tell that they're a baby when he saw one.
Joshua, we're proud of you. And I bet you, are you proud of your daddy?
Yeah.
And what do you hope that will happen as a result of what your daddy's doing? What would you like to see about this abortion business? Would you like to see them stop aborting babies?
Yeah.
You'd like to see that stop, huh? God bless you. And thank you for coming up here today, okay? Matt, let's go to the phones.
Okay.
And Joshua, thank you again. We'll let you kind of go back to the chair, and we're going to open the phone lines. And your comments tonight, telephone number 1-800-733-TV30. That's for people outside of the Milwaukee area. And right here in Milwaukee, 935-3030. If you'd like to call and share your thoughts, your questions, your comments, and we'll be happy to take your calls. The issue of demonstrating your convictions, Matt Trewhella, Rescue Operation Milwaukee is the organization that has said we cannot be silent. Your reaction to these injunctions. When we were on the air talking about this, we had phone calls from all over the United States, people saying they were pleased. I didn't have one dissenting call that was not pleased with you for tearing them up. The calls, and we were receiving calls as quickly as possible. Tonight, we have an opportunity for listeners all across the area to join us. The phone lines are literally loading up here. We're up to 5 lines. We have 14 lines, so we can take 9 more. If you'd like to talk with us, just your brief statements, your comments as we come on the air here with your opportunity for exchange on the program we call In Focus, right here on TV 30. Let's go to line number 1. Line 1, you're on the air.
Hello, Vic.
Yes, your comments quickly.
Okay, basically with that city attorney that didn't want the kid in the courtroom, I only keep my kids away from things that I think would be harmful to them. Does she think so little of her profession that children shouldn't be exposed to the legal system?
Powerful question. Thank you. Line 2, you're on the air.
Hi.
Yes, ma'am. Sounded like there was a little baby along there with the caller. Line 3, you're on the air.
Hello, Matthew.
Hello.
It's Mike Swaney. I used to work with you at Ryder.
Oh.
And Matthew, I love you. And I'm 100% behind what you're doing. I don't feel led to be involved the same way you do, but I'm 100% behind what you're doing. God bless you, Matthew. Bye now.
God bless you.
Thank you for those calls. Let's keep them coming rapidly, very quickly, as we call 935-3030 or 1-800-733-TV30. And we're going to go to line 4 right now. 4, you're on the air.
Hi. Well, in regards to the gentleman having an opinion on the matter, I think it's a woman's choice, and I really don't think that men have any right, to say one way or another. I mean, it's our right to make that decision if that's what we want to do.
Well, ma'am, let me ask you a question. How many does a woman become pregnant with child without anybody else being involved?
Sometimes.
With no male involvement?
Well, without a male involvement? Well, they have, a sperm.
Okay, well, ma'am.
Fertilize you that way, if that's what you mean.
Well, what I'm saying, ma'am, is this, that you know and I know that a woman is biologically designed different from a man, correct?
Right.
All right. That equipment makes her a host to another living creature. Is that not correct?
Right, but when it's not when it's not the right time for a person to choose, when they're pregnant, if it's not the right time, then this child may be subjected to abuse.
What could be more abusing than killing it within the womb?
Well, at least it won't be put through some of the agony. Some of these kids are born and their lives are just a living hell from day one.
Ma'am, let me ask you this. Does the level of pain and the age of the individual make any difference? I mean, is not pain to an infant just as meaningful as pain to an adult?
I suppose it would be.
Well, then why would you rationalize and say that it's all right for a little infant, unborn, to suffer pain, but then you deny and you say, well, they would suffer pain if they were older?
Well, before the baby, when a baby is only 2 or 3 or 2 months old, I don't think that it really realizes what's going on.
Ma'am, maybe it can't express it, but there have been photographs taken even with sonograph equipment showing the grimace and the reaction from pain.
Right, well, I've seen photographs of crowds of starving children, too.
So what
can you say to that?
Do 2 wrongs make a right, ma'am?
Well, a lot of people don't think that's wrong.
Ma'am, I'm asking you this. Do 2 wrongs make a right?
No, certainly not.
Well, then why do you talk about starving a child? There are people today who would be willing to starve a child to death, too. That's being done. It's called infanticide.
Oh, right. I mean, it's not done intentionally in a way.
Oh, yes, it is, ma'am.
Oh, yeah, I believe that, but
I mean, there's a little sign put on the edge of the crib, no feeding by mouth?
No.
Yes. You doubt my words?
Yes, I do. That seems kind of ridiculous.
Well, let me tell you that right in this county, I've had medical professionals have indicated that they have seen it happen.
Why would someone want to starve their own child?
That's a good question.
Maybe if abortion was a little more free, then the child wouldn't have to deal with that.
Well, you kill them one way or another, right?
How much freer could it get? How much freer could it get? To me, this is the ultimate utilitarian comment. It's justifiable to kill a child here because another child is starving 10,000 miles away. I mean, you have to be an ultimate utilitarian to hold such a belief. It's so absurd.
Well, I don't really, appreciate being labeled like that because I don't see myself as like that. I just know this is a free country, and we should at least have a choice. I'm not saying it's
Ma'am, who
wrong.
should have a choice?
The woman, of course.
What about the child?
Pardon me?
What about the child? Doesn't the child have a right to choose life?
No, because when my parents told me to go to school, I did. I didn't have a choice.
Ma'am, that is not denying them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That happens to be a human right.
Well, what do you think about all the overpopulation that's going on in the
Ma'am, you're talking about situation ethics, and I can understand where you might get that, but it still does not rationalize the right to take another's life. We are all given by the Constitution and by God the right to live, to pursue happiness, and to breathe the fresh air of America. And I would question anybody that would deny that from anyone else. Thank you for your call. You're on the air, line 5. Line 1, you're on the air.
Hi, I'd like to confess something to you I haven't confessed to my own family.
Would you come a little closer to the phone, ma'am?
Okay. Is this better?
That's much better.
Thank you. 16 years ago, I had an abortion. And I'll tell you, I wish somebody was outside to stop me. As the time went by, at first when I'd see people come and picket, I used to think, oh, why are they there? It's so hard on the person already. But then I realized the older I got that they're there because you don't know what you're doing in that mind frame. I had a million reasons why this was the right thing, of course. I could ramble them off, but there's no time for them all. It's just that, how can I explain it? I just wish it never would have happened.
Simply share your thoughts with the young lady who just called a few moments ago. I don't know if she's ever lived through post-abortion syndrome,
Well,
but you've lived it, ma'am. You know it.
I thought that I was doing just fine. I thought everything was going fine, but afterwards, past years, in hindsight now, I realize after the fact, I became more promiscuous. Before that, it was always just me and my fiancé. And then, well, now my fiancé and I were broke up. It had nothing to do with the abortion, it just happened. So now, all of a sudden, I noticed myself going to bars and things I didn't do before. And
self-esteem.
Pardon?
Self-esteem deteriorated.
Very low, but I didn't realize it at the time. It wasn't until years later that I thought about it. In hindsight, like I said, all of a sudden I was just a different person. I'm just shaking. I can't even describe it.
Ma'am, you have shared your heart with us tonight, something you have never even shared with your family. I hope someone listening tonight listens not only with their ears, but with their heart. Thank you for calling.
You're welcome.
Let's go to line number 3. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi. I would like to congratulate the fellow you have on the show tonight for their rescue efforts. He's a wonderful spokesperson for the Right to Life movement. I just love listening to the pro-choice people because the only reason the laws are on the books today protecting their right is because they claim that it can't be proven that life begins at conception. But if you listen to the pro-choice people and you listen to the people that are going into the abortion clinics for abortions, they have no doubt that this is a baby that they're dealing with, and that this is a life that they're dealing with. Even your caller before called it a baby. She had no doubt that that's what it was. And so it's just a matter of rationalization through the abortion process.
An unwanted baby, or in other language, a garbage pail kid.
Exactly. I have 10 beautiful children. None of my children, well, the first one was planned. many of the other ones we planned on having. But the timing was never perfect for any of them. We never could afford any of them. We live, the way we live because of a lot of sacrifice. I just pray for these women who are having abortions because I just pray for the children, and I pray for them mentally when they go through the abortion process just for a matter of convenience, and that's what so much of it is getting to be now.
I thank you very much for sharing that.
And I would ask your viewers tonight to please watch carefully who they go to for OBGYN, for their OBGYN doctors. just to look into the background a little bit, so many doctors do perform abortions, and women don't realize that many of the doctors affiliated with the HMOs do perform abortions. And
what you're saying, ma'am, is that if a woman is going to an OBGYN, they ought to actually come out and ask,
exactly.
does Dr. X or Dr. Y perform abortions?
I've done it, and I found out that a doctor that was affiliated with their HMO was the only one that I had a choice of dealing with.
Got to move along, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you for the call. Got to move very quickly. We've got all kinds of calls lined up. Line 2. You're on the air.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, the lady who was out for abortion, I noticed she was able to laugh. So that means she is a fairly happy person, and I wish you would give her, have the thought of having a baby. That baby will be happy too. So far as baby being miserable in this world, it happens times that happens. But I have had a baby 50 years ago, and I went through hell, and I'm glad I did. She's very happy today. She thanks me for having her. And I also had an aunt who had abortion at 6 months, and she regretted it to her dying day. So
you're glad that you kept yours?
I sure am. And my daughter thanks me every day that I had her, and we went through hell together. I finally got married to a good man, and
you're glad you made the right choice.
I sure am.
Thank you very much for calling tonight. We appreciate that. We're going to go to line. Sorry if I have to move along rapidly, folks, but I've got people waiting lined up here that we'll never get to. So if we can kind of condense our statements just to about a sentence or two, we're going to take them as fast as we can. Line number 6, you're on the air.
I have in front of me an article from Concerned Women of America about a young woman who died, Rebecca Bell, supposedly from a botched abortion that wouldn't have happened with the proper facilities and so on. The whole thing, as it is in most cases, is not just a far-fetched hypothetical thing. It's actually a complete lie. She died actually from the result of a miscarriage when she became terminally ill with pneumonia. Whenever you deal with a lot of these pro-abortion people, you're just dealing with a bunch of lies that are voiced in the public, in a lot of instances anyway, and as it happened with this case.
Thank you for your call, sir. Let's move along. I think our next call is line number 7. You're on the air.
Yes, I'm a 23-year-old woman.
Ma'am, could I trouble you to get a little closer to your phone?
Sure. Is this
much better?
Okay. I'm a 23-year-old woman, and I live in Milwaukee. I would like to start out by saying that I don't believe in abortion, but I do have a problem with the protesters. I have a friend who works at an abortion clinic in Milwaukee, and she's a counselor there. And every day she has to go to work, and she has to fight her way through these protesters.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
You say she's a counselor. Is she a counselor or is she a salesperson?
No, she's a counselor.
Does she advise people against abortion?
Well, she advises the patients of their options.
Well,
that's about as far as I'll go with that.
The reason I ask that, because anybody that draws their paycheck from somebody who performs abortions, I guess personally, and it's my opinion, that I would ask the question how objective a person like that could be.
I would like to know which abortion clinic there's that many people at that they have to fight their way in. I wish it was that way at every abortion clinic. The truth of the matter is there's not people at the abortion clinics. We need more people out there to minister and to reach out. So
well, the
I think
only thing
that's
I will
a joke.
say about that is that I won't give you the name of the abortion clinic itself, but there has been a lot of publicity about the abortion clinic on TV lately and in the newspapers.
Bread and Roses is the only one that I know of.
Well, yeah, Bread and Roses, that is the abortion clinic that I am talking about. My only problem is I think that it's, I don't want to say a waste of time, but can't you think of any other way to get your point across without wasting taxpayers' dollars by involving the police in this? Because every time this happens, the police have to come, and I just think that the police department has better things to do then have to come down there to the abortion clinics and arrest you people. I mean, I don't think
we're not there to make a point. We're there to keep an innocent, helpless human being from being butchered to death.
I can
That's what we're
understand
there
your
for.
point of view, and I know a lot of people do have the same feelings as you do. As I said, I'm very young. I'm only 23 years old, and I do have a lot of friends, people that I go to school with, that do feel the same way. They're very against abortion. But don't you think that there could be a better way that you could work with the police department so that it just seems like...
No, there is no way we can work better with the police department. They have chosen to side with the child killers. And we are intolerant of child killing, and we will go to the doors day after day until our last breath is in our body. This is a fight to the death, and we are out to rescue helpless people from being murdered, and we will continue to go back, and we will not negotiate with people. Asking us to negotiate with people who are sided with the child killers or to negotiate with the child killers themselves is like asking the French resistance to negotiate with Adolf Hitler.
Okay.
It can't happen.
How
It's impossible.
do you feel about Planned Parenthood? And from what I understand, I'm not sure if they're doing this already, but isn't Planned Parenthood planning on performing abortions in Milwaukee, or are they already doing it?
Yeah, they've been planning it for a long time, but they're still not doing it.
They're still not doing it.
No.
Okay, because I heard through the grapevine that they were.
Well, they just bought the clinic out up in
Milwaukee. Because I do have a friend who's.
Very quickly, ma'am.
Well, okay, that's enough. That's fine.
Okay. Matt, share about this clinic. You said they bought. Thank you for calling, ma'am. About the clinic.
Planned Parenthood bought out the Maggie Cage's clinic up in Little Chute, Grand Chute, up in the middle of the state, and so they have their own abortuary now.
So, in essence, what you're saying is the clinic may not, or the abortion clinic may not be in Milwaukee, but they would ferry the people up there.
I don't know. They're planning on opening one here in Milwaukee
I see.
too, and but they haven't yet.
Okay, we've got to move along right now. Line 4, you're on the air.
Hi, Vic. I wanted to mention a couple other things. Not only should the women find out if their doctors perform abortions, but they ought to find out if their doctors refer women to other abortuaries to have their children killed. Also, they should find out if their ministers refer women to abortuaries to have their children killed. Because we who've been counseling at these clinics have found that many doctors refer women over there to kill the children.
You know, sir, I want to pick up on that word counseling, because counselors, sidewalk counselors, people who are saying there is an option, there's another direction you can go. And then we just talked to this young lady who said that her friend was a counselor at an abortion clinic. If I saw a dividing line whereby 50% of the people who came to an abortion clinic ended up going to an adoption center, I'd like to ask any abortion clinic, who is the adoption center that you refer people to? And I find that the information I have from people who have been at the abortion clinics is that they have not even suggested, this came from the lips of those who were there, have not even suggested that the option of adoption would be something that could be considered.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to cut you off, sir. If you had another thought, go ahead.
Only one thing. I noticed that so many people don't understand the difference between demonstration and rescue. People who demonstrate against the war are demonstrators.
That's right.
People who sit in front of the doors and try to prevent the killing of a human being are not there to demonstrate.
That's right.
They're there to rescue children and save them from...
That's right. I told Greg O'Mara when I was he's a district attorney, when I was with him yesterday, he tried to tell me that what you're involved in is just a protest. It's no different than these anti-war protesters who are protesting the carpet bombing in Baghdad. And I said, Greg, there is a difference. There is imminent danger to a helpless human being. We are in front of the door. If the child goes inside the door, the child is killed. That is totally different than a protest. If these people are protesting the war, wanted to do what we're doing, they would go over to Iraq, put people on buses, and start busing them out of Iraq so they would no longer be victims of carpet bombing. And he couldn't refute that, so he moved on to another argument.
Ladies and gentlemen, our phone lines are still busy. We have run out of time. We've come to the end of another hour of the program we call In Focus. Our guest tonight is Reverend Matt Trewhella, who represents Rescue Operation Milwaukee. He is an advocate of standing in the gap, protecting the unborn. He has a mailing address, at least a box number or a phone number. If you want to get in touch with him, Matt, would you give it to us, please?
Our phone number is 541. Oh, I'm sorry. That's my home phone number.
Back up.
536-1038. 536-1038.
536-1038. And
Yeah.
Do you have a box number they can write to?
Sure. It's P.O. Box 27171. 27171, and that's Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53227.
Matt, would you be here for a few minutes after we leave the air if people want to call and talk with you off the air?
Sure, that's fine.
Interesting program tonight. Folks, the issue is not going to go away. As long as babies are being killed in abortion clinics, as long as the option to take innocent human life exists, there will be this life and death struggle by people who have convictions that they are willing to die for. Thanks for joining us tonight on In Focus.
If you would like a cassette copy of tonight's In Focus program, send $4 to cover mailing and duplicating costs to WVCY, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin 53208. Be sure to include the date and subject matter of the program. The views expressed by guests and callers are not necessarily the views of Wisconsin Voice of Christian Youth. In Focus is a VCY teleproduction.